One of the things that's on my heart today, have you ever noticed, and I'm sure all of us do this, but some of us do it more than others, but have you ever noticed how many things you feel, especially bad feelings, how many things you go through in a given day that you never put into words, that you never express to anybody else, that you never write down, that you never even express to yourself? There is an enormous amount of things going on down inside of us, themes that run through our minds, themes that run through our hearts, sometimes things that are affecting our lives in powerful ways. Sometimes it's just little stuff that just kind of runs through your mind, but sometimes it's very powerful stuff that is affecting your life that have never seen the light of day, that have never been brought up to being said. And I personally believe that there's two good reasons why we need to have some occasion where we can sit down with someone, or where we can just sit down with a piece of paper and to put things into words. One of them is because some of those things are very childlike. Some of them have been there from our earliest years. Some of us have carried impressions that were formed, powerfully formed, and very reasonably formed when we were very, very young, that we have never allowed to be spoken and to be measured in terms of adulthood. It is amazing how many of those things occur. Secondly, the reason is because I think that things that we keep down deep inside, especially if they're very intense, and this is not just negative things, it's positive things too. I mean, sometimes love feels this way, you know. I think they're sort of embryonic. I'm not saying that they're unreal or that they're illegitimate. I just think they do not take on realistic proportion as long as they only remain deep inside of us. There are some things inside of us that exist in larger than life proportion. There are other things inside of us that exist in smaller than life proportion. And it's through the process of talking about them, exchanging with others about them, bringing them to our lips, talking with God about them, that can partly help bring them into life-size proportion. It is fascinating how that can occur. I'll give a very, very little example of that. I went back not long ago and spoke. I was asked to be the special speaker at a camp that I used to go to as a child. Now, there was some things about that camp that I remember, some of which were wonderful, some of which were, I wouldn't call them painful memories, but they weren't happy memories. And it was fascinating going back to that camp. In fact, as I drove up the driveway to that camp, I could feel some of the emotions of some of the camps that I spent there, and especially one summer when something happened that was not traumatic and wasn't life-bending, but, it was just something I was thinking about when I was driving up there, and that sort of cast a little bit of a shadow over that camp. When I got to the camp, and I took one of my sons with me on this excursion, when I got to the camp, started driving around, I could not believe how different it was from what I remembered, particularly in size. And of course, the reason was because I was much younger and much smaller when I attended the camp. But the lake that I thought was the size of the Atlantic Ocean and that I couldn't believe anybody could swim across is a pond. Now, that's a normal experience of the proportions that are remembered from childhood. But there was also a particular part of the camp where something, I can't go into the whole story, but where something that I felt like was a failure while I was at that camp occurred, that when I went and looked at it, I thought there was no failure there. In fact, I kind of got intrigued about how much of a success there was of something that I had climbed, of an achievement that I had made. And that's a very important thing. Not just about proportions of things that we remember, like buildings and so forth. I think all of us would go back to something from our childhood and be surprised at how small it seems compared with how we remembered it. But that's true of emotions. It's true of people. It's true of impressions about ourselves. It's true of impressions about God. And that's why it's so important that we not just let them sit there and stew and influence our lives from a perspective that is not life-size.